All right, cool. Chris, appreciate it. Thank you very much. All right, well, good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're all joining us from. Chris, thank you for kicking us off, and thank you to your team for helping us put this on. I also just want to give a quick shout out to my colleagues at EPA and at our contractor. As you all know, it just wholeheartedly takes a village to run a program. And I am privileged to introduce our three presenters for today. As you all will see, they're just going to go one after the other. So first off, my great colleague, just a few cubicles down from me, Sarah LaVoy. She is the outdoor program coordinator for EPA's WaterSense program. She works with the technical team on new outdoor specifications, coordinates with professional certifying organizations to certify efficiency specialists in irrigation, and develops resources to promote water efficient practices to industry and the public. She has a master's degree in public affairs and environmental science, both focusing on water resource management from Indiana University, and a bachelor's degree from The Ohio State University. That "the" always throws me off. Never far away from a forest or body of water, Sarah enjoys biking, hiking, and camping in her spare time. Next, we have Frank Kinder. He is the Water Efficiency and Sustainability Manager for Northern Water, a conservancy district operating the Colorado Big Thompson Water Project that serves 33 cities, 29 rural domestic providers, and over 600,000 acres of farmland in Northeast Colorado. His department provides commercial landscape consultations, water audits, outreach, training, tools, landscape transformation grants, and maintains a conservation garden at their headquarters, at their lead headquarters. Frank has a master's in sustainable development and an undergraduate degree in finance from the University of Colorado. His past board service includes advisory committee chair for Metropolitan State University's One World, One Water Center, board co-chair of Colorado Wise and others. He is proud that his conservation career has helped his agencies receive the 2013 and the 2015 EPA WaterSense Award of Excellence for Strategic Collaborations, and the 2012, 2014, 2020, 2021, and 2022 EPA WaterSense Utility Promotional Partner of the Year Award, and the 2023 Sustained Excellence Award. I think in sports that would be like a dynasty. Frank loves music, hiking, dogs, and lifelong learning. And last but certainly not least, we have Mike Kocsis. He is a retired industrial researcher and financial planner with over 2 decades of experience in product development for a major chemical company, and another 2 decades as a personal financial planner and financial advisor. Mike and his spouse Deb moved to Loveland, Colorado, and Fairway Ridge at Mariana Butte, which we'll be hearing a bit more about in 2015. And Mike served on the Fairway Ridge HOA board from 2017 through 2020, and is currently serving on the HOA's Design Review Committee and Finance Committee. All right, let's keep it going. Next, move it to the next slide. All right, so before we jump into the material, I just want to remind everyone that this webinar is part of a monthly series that Energy Star and WaterSense host together for commercial and institutional facilities. Already this year, we've held 3 webinars about really quick water wins. The first one being how small operations and maintenance changes can save you water. The second being water savings from capital improvement projects, which really addressed how to go above and beyond the low-hanging fruit and really take on retrofit or replacement projects. Last month, we covered how to conduct a water assessment from start to finish. Definitely helpful for those of you that might be new to the water space. And recordings of these webinars are available on the Energy Star website if you're interested. Coming up in August, we're going to have a webinar on how to save water in your restrooms. And later this fall, we're planning on having webinars on mechanical systems, as well as one on advanced metering infrastructure. So please be on the lookout for those invites so that you can sign up for those webinars. Sincerely, we really love seeing folks come back, seeing those repeat attendee names here on WebEx on the side. So we really want our partners, our stakeholders, and you, the public, to continue to get value out of WaterSense. Lastly, I'll also note that if you've got a really great water saving story that you'd like to share with us and with a broader audience, please reach out. We want to hear about it. In fact, we've already had some folks reach out after last month's webinar, and we're actively deciding on the topics and recruiting for our webinars for next year. And of course, we're always happy to recruit and welcome more folks to be part of the WaterSense program. In case this is your first time to one of our webinars or your first time hearing about WaterSense, We are a voluntary program that was launched out of EPA in 2006. I think that was my junior year of high school. The program works to promote water efficiency so that we can help organizations and consumers save water for future generations. The WaterSense label, that I think we have, that you can see here, that we have like on that upper right hand corner, provides a simple way for consumers and businesses to identify water efficient products, programs, practices, and homes. Products that earn the WaterSense label have been independently certified for water efficiency as well as performance. The label is reserved for products that reduce water use by at least 20%, and again, perform as well or better than what we see in the standard model. So performance continues to be a key metric. And I'll also admit that it's very cool when you see toilets in stores or restaurants that have the label. So I invite you, just keep an eye out when you're out and about next time. So there's a wide variety of residential and commercial products eligible for the WaterSense label that can be used in commercial and institutional facilities. To date, we have more than 45,000 product models that have earned the label in 8 different categories, including indoor plumbing products like toilets and urinals and shower heads, as well as outdoor irrigation products like irrigation controllers and spray sprinkler bodies. More information can be found on these products on our website. In addition to these product categories, we also really work closely and in tandem with EPA's Energy Star program to include water factors in their specifications. And conversely, we consider energy savings in ours. So for example, Energy Star certified clothes washers, dishwashers, and ice machines are all also water efficient compared to the standard models. Just to provide a little bit of context, there are a few things to keep in mind when you start looking at your water use. The first big one is that the cost of water can be deceptively low. Because of the way that water rates are structured, facilities end up paying for water twice, so that any wasted water really makes a huge impact. The water rate is charged based on the amount of water that is supplied, and then you have the sewer rate, which is charged based on the amount of water discharged to the sewer. So because of um, these other costs, the true cost of water can be calculated by combining both that water and sewer rate and then multiplying it by the volume of water that you used. Um, you really need to really need to also add in all the fees and associated costs to get that complete holistic picture. The second point that we want to add is that using more water can result in other increased operation and maintenance costs. Many pieces of equipment will require more maintenance if you're using them above their normal capacity, and energy can be wasted if it's used to pump as well as heat extra water that you don't actually need or use. And again, over time, all of these costs just really add up and factor into that total cost of water. So for today, since we're talking about outdoor water use, I'll mention one final point, and that is some utilities will actually provide a credit for sewer costs if you can prove that the water evaporated instead of being actually discharged into the sewer by your facility. So this could include water used for irrigation, cooling towers, pools, and spas. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and segue it over to my colleague Sarah LaVoy, since water use is kind of her passion and her forte, and I'll hand it over to you. Sarah, let's go ahead and make you the presenter.
Great. Thank you, Gracie. Thank you all for joining us today, and happy Olympics to all who celebrate. I'm wearing all my gear today. And yeah, we're going to talk about some outdoor water use. So with commercial buildings, let me change the slide. There we go. With commercial buildings, water use varies depending on the building type. Knowing exactly your building's uses for water and where it consumes the most, either by tracking meters or sub-meters, or by conducting a water assessment, will help you identify potential efficiency projects and prioritize your efforts. In the meantime, WaterSense created this chart to show how water is used within some of the common commercial building types. Consistently, water is used outdoors for primarily landscaping, and it can be between 5 and 30% of overall water use among these 5 building types. The irrigated landscape is that green portion on the bar graph, while the other common outdoor water use is pools, which is that very light blue portion. But this is typically only applied to maybe schools and hospitality facilities, so facilities where we commonly see pools. And while these represent averages, every building is different. So if you want to specifically know your building's water use, it's important to do an assessment to find out how much water your building is using. All right, so why look at outdoor water? It is important to look at outdoor water because I guess just when considering ways to be more water efficient, because water use is usually, again, in that 5 to 30% use of the building's water use. Water use is also a primary driver of peak use for utilities. And water providers must size their systems to meet this peak demand. This capacity is not used very often, so seasonal water use that contributes to peak demand is a very attractive target for municipalities trying to bring down their peak demand. And because of this, outdoor water use is typically the first to be restricted during droughts or other shortages. By reducing the water demand for your facility, water providers, which typically size their water system based on this peak demand use, are less burdened by keeping water at capacity. And what we mean by peak demand, usually that is in correlation with the hotter months and the growing months of the year. It just means that essentially when you think of water use on a building standpoint, faucets and toilets, while we can make those products more efficient, people are going to use toilets routinely, but outdoor use really has this really obvious bell curve. Because we water more often when our plants are growing or when it's hot or there's a season of drought. So back to outdoor water use restrictions, these are often implemented because they're also visible and easy to police. If you see the sidewalk wet, it's really an easy thing to connect. So municipalities can enforce these restrictions because they can literally just drive around and see that water is being used out in the open. And finally, using higher volumes of water can trigger higher water rates. So many utilities also use increasing block rates where incremental cost goes up with increased usage. So using larger volumes of water can be very costly. And because of this, your outdoor water use can contribute to placing your facility in a higher water rate tier that will cost you more money each month. You also want to protect your investment in plants by using the correct amount of water so that your plants are not overwatered. We find this is a pretty common problem as well. Sometimes grass will get brown actually when it's overwatered. And we obviously don't want the response to be using more water. All right, so as I mentioned before, outdoor water use can be 5 to 30% of a building's water use. Overall, the main goal of water use outdoors is to minimize the amount of water needed to supplement rainwater to meet those plants' watering needs. So when working with landscapers or irrigation service contractors, it's best that water efficiency goals are included in any agreements or contracts, as well as a requirement to meet all of the local water restrictions, so keep up to date if there is some sort of drought restriction. Anything like that. So if you don't work with a landscape service provider, existing staff can attend courses or seminars to learn about water efficient practices and techniques. WaterSense has a ton of webinars and resources on that very topic. We're all here listening to one. So there are several factors we have found that indicate high water use in commercial buildings. These can be really good places to start when looking for savings. We know that it's sometimes hard to sift through all of the ways you can save water. So these are good places to start. So the first is looking at the age of your facility and the age of the equipment. It's a really good indicator. Generally, the older the equipment or fixture, the more water it uses. Plumbing and building codes have become more stringent over time. So older equipment, it's a really good rule of thumb to just assume that they will always use more water. And the next indicator for high water use is the size of the facility's landscaped and irrigated areas. This usually greatly affects water use depending on, of course, the type of plants used and the climate. But really anywhere where watering needs of the plant exceed the amount of precipitation require some sort of irrigation and will use more water to keep, those plants alive. Irrigated systems are not always wasteful, but they do result in more water usage, obviously, compared to a facility without irrigated areas. So we want to account for all of that landscape that does get irrigated regularly. Facility managers can use drought status resources to get an idea of water shortages that may affect their facilities in both the short and long term. They often also recommend irrigation time schedules and, like inches per week. And minimizing the size of the landscape needed irrigation obviously will help keep water use under control. It's also really helpful to create and be mindful of what we call microclimates in the landscape. And by zoning these specific microclimates, we can minimize water use. And just to quickly describe what microclimates are, they're small localized areas where the climate differs from maybe the surrounding area, and they can be very small, so a few square feet, or as large as many miles. I think a great example of a microclimate is plants that grow perhaps under a shade tree. Shade provides a lot of reprieve, from the sun and direct sunlight. So often plants that grow underneath the shade of a tree require less water because there's less evapotranspiration happening there. So if we zone those specific microclimates, we can help reduce water use as well. All right. Irrigation is used to supplement water that the landscape loses due to evapotranspiration. So evaporation from the ground and then evaporation through the plant is called transpiration. We just combine the terms together into evapotranspiration. So in cooler months and in months where rainfall is high, the landscape does not lose water very quickly. Therefore, irrigation can be reduced. In warmer months or months with little rainfall, it may be necessary to start or increase irrigation. This chart is an example of the rainfall and evapotranspiration plant needs for Tampa, Florida. As you can see from the chart, this is that really nice bell curve I talked about for peak demand. They often very much correlate peak demand and the demand for evapotranspiration. And from this chart, the time period of water deficit can be different throughout the year. But in this case, the highest month of deficit is April. There is also the largest amount of water needed for supplemental irrigation. So this will differ based on your climate. But generally, it is in the warmer months and within the growing months for plants. So when you look at these evapotranspiration curves, irrigation can be further reduced by choosing plants that are, of course, low water use or native. So we kind of try and flatten that curve through our plant choices as well. On to landscaping, a good segue. So a well-designed landscape will minimize any supplemental water needed from your irrigation system. Your soil is the foundation of your landscape. So healthy soils help develop deep plant root systems that allow water to properly infiltrate into the soil. The more water we get into the soil, the happier our plants are, the more that's available for them. And maintaining good topsoil that captures that rain as it falls, then again, releases that water back to the plants over time. If possible in the landscape, avoid including steep slopes in your design. A good tip is that if it is too steep to climb, it's too steep for irrigation. If you do have to have a graded area, consider installing rain gardens to capture that stormwater runoff. So when we have, steep inclines and irrigation hits it, generally, gravity works. And if the irrigation slope is too steep, the water can't actually get into the soil, right? It runs off and doesn't necessarily go where we want it. So again, in the landscape, another great tip is adding mulch to plant beds. This keeps the soils cool and minimizes direct evaporation from the soil itself. And then finally, in your landscape, it should be designed by grouping plants according to their water needs. I kind of talked about this a bit when mentioning microclimates. So if we zone our plants based on how much water they need, or perhaps the microclimate they're in, this will efficiently let us irrigate those specific zones. So we can kind of change how much water we apply to each of those zones, resulting in water savings. All right, beyond just general landscaping tips, we also want to consider the plants of types, or excuse me, the type of plants that we use within the landscape. There are several different types of plants that can be used to create a functional and attractive landscape. Facility managers can consider any combination of trees and shrubs, ground cover, and turf grass to best fit their needs. If you use drought tolerant and climate appropriate plantings and materials, you may not need to water as much to maintain your landscape quality. These types of plants can require less time and cost to maintain as well. States or municipalities often maintain plant lists of native and climate appropriate plants. So please check out your local Department of Natural Resources web pages. And I mentioned trees already. Install shade trees, since shading again reduces water requirements from the plants that fall under, the shade of that tree. And also there's great benefits from cooling for trees as well. And again, your landscape should be designed by grouping plants according to their water needs. Again, I don't know if I mentioned this, but essentially planting drought tolerant or climate appropriate plants, whether they're native or plants that were designed to be a little less water intensive. They were, again, through evolution or through specific design, made to require less water. So if we water those spaces less, again, that will result in some water savings. And when it comes to actually, I moved my slide, maintaining our existing plantings, we want to make sure that we protect our investments in plants, and regular maintenance things that should be done in the landscape include weeding. We want to make sure that we take unwanted plants out of the landscape so that more water is available to the ornamental plants. We want to raise the blade on mowers to allow grass to grow longer. Longer grass growth promotes deeper root growth and a more drought-resistant turf. It also creates a microclimate, so less evapotranspiration happens, or more like less evaporation happens from the soil when we have microclimates from a little longer turf. And then finally, taking advantage of shaded areas by applying less water to those areas. So those are those spaces under tree cover. Another best practice to reduce water use for other purposes is if you don't need ornamental water features, or there are times of the day or year when they can be turned off, then turn off those ornamental water features. These are, ponds or fountains, to reduce surface evaporation. And then we can also recirculate any water flowing through the fountains, ponds, waterfalls, or other features. So as opposed to it just going through the fountain and then down the drain, we want to circulate the water within those features. And then finally, make sure that you sweep sidewalks, driveways, pool decks, and any other landscapes instead of using, power washers to clean those areas. If it can be cleaned with a broom, go ahead and take the few extra minutes to do it. If you feel that your hardscapes need water for a more thorough clean, purchase a specific water broom, which cleans hard surfaces much more efficiently than a typical garden hose. So if we do want to use, a power washer, make sure we get an actual water broom instead of, just like pinching the hose, which I know I did a lot as a kid. All right, on to some WaterSense labeled products. So WaterSense now labels both weather-based and soil moisture-based irrigation controllers. These controllers similarly operate by adjusting your irrigation schedule based on local weather and on-site conditions. So the weather-based controller uses local weather, often an airport, and then soil moisture uses on-site conditions within the soil. So those controllers allow you to choose. Ooh, I lost where I was. Essentially, those two features are things that you can choose between. Weather-based controllers use a combination of weather station data and evapotranspiration data from your site to determine the landscape needs to allow or bypass an irrigation cycle. Weather-based controllers also have the capability to store information for multiple irrigation zones, depending on the size of your landscape. So those are those microclimates that we pick out and how we organize those plants based on their water needs. Soil moisture-based controllers track the exact amount of water in your soil, and they will bypass an irrigation cycle if soil water is sufficient. So depending on the uniformity of your landscape, you may need multiple soil moisture sensors connected to a base controller to accurately irrigate. So those, again, talking about those microclimates or those zones that we're creating through our landscape design. So the capabilities of these controllers, whether you choose a clock timer, a weather-based controller, or a soil moisture-based controller, the end driver of water use is your irrigation schedule that you program. Irrigation schedules should be updated monthly to account for changing weather conditions. You know, that's, again, goes kind of hand in hand with the seasons. We have hot, drier months. We have wetter months, depending on where we live within the United States. Your landscape will need less water in the spring and fall generally than high peak of summer. So that's, again, correlating with that peak demand that utilities often base their systems on. If you don't have a controller that adjusts the schedule for you, you'll again want to make sure that you do it yourself really monthly, if not at least seasonally. Irrigation zones should be scheduled individually based on each zone's watering needs. These are, again, those microclimates that we talk about and grouping plants together. You want to consider the exposure to sun, wind, the plant type, the soil type, and your sprinkler type when determining the irrigation schedule for each zone. And if you see any pooling or puddling within your landscape, you want to check for a leak in your irrigation system. All of these tips are available in our irrigation controller brochure, Is Your Watering Under Control? It goes into a lot of detail on adjusting your schedule based on the season, different irrigation requirements based on zone, and the different types of controller technologies available. So if what I just said went like way over your head, this is a great place to start. It really outlines everything that you would need to know about scheduling. All right, on to our other product. We have spray sprinkler bodies. And spray sprinkler bodies are the housing that connects the irrigation water supply line that holds the sprinkler head. So when you have your sprinkler that pops up, there's like this neck, and then the top is the spray sprinkler nozzle. But the thing that you like plant in the ground, that is the spray sprinkler body. So spray sprinkler bodies regulate internal pressure and keep the sprinkler outlet pressure consistent, even when incoming pressure maybe changes. So the pressure from your water line, if that changes, the spray sprinkler body regulates that pressure. So if water pressure is left unchecked, sprinklers can lose water either from misting or from overspray. So if that pressure is too high, the spray sprinkler nozzle does not operate as it was intended to, leading to water waste. So by installing pressure regulated sprinklers, the result is a more consistent flow rate across the entire system. Maintaining the pressure also keeps a consistent droplet size that reduces water loss due to misting and overspray. So if our water droplets get really small and there's wind, it's gone, and that's wasted water. If you are going to replace an old sprinkler body with one that is water efficient, you definitely want to make sure that you replace all of the sprinklers within that zone to maintain a consistent pressure. So this change is something that does have to be done by zone to actually see those water savings. Right. So now we're going to talk about how to find waterways that you might see on your facilities. Throughout the irrigation season, we want to check for water waste in the landscape, including spray that is landing on hardscapes. That means, like sidewalks or driveways. Concrete doesn't grow. We don't need to water it. We want to look for leaks and broken sprinkler heads. Yeah, you can see some broken sprinkler heads on those pictures. They're geysering pretty good. Sprinkler heads can often be broken or damaged by lawnmowers. So check the landscape for broken or clogged sprinkler heads and make sure the heads aren't tilted too high or too low so that the water actually hits, the plants and that soil beneath the plants. So move or adjust the sprinkler components so that they aren't watering hardscapes or their pavement. Like I said, pavement doesn't grow. We don't need to water it. If you see any pooling or puddling in the landscape, you want to check for a leak in your irrigation system or a broken nozzle perhaps. Also, depressions in the landscape can indicate an underground leak. So if you see any depressions that weren't there originally, that's a good indicator. Installing sub-meters on the system is really great to help you indicate inefficiencies or system leaks. If you have water meters or sub-meters installed, you want to read them at least monthly and take note of that. That way, if you do see a notable change, you can look back at previous months to actually mark that it is an out of, characteristic change. So having historical data really helps with sub-metering to see if anything is out of the norm. And if you do this annually for a few years, your annual water use should form that bell curve that we talked about with peak demand, with the highest irrigation use in the summer months, your drier, hotter months. And this indicates that you are adjusting your schedule regularly to account for those seasonal climate changes. So if you just have a consistent water use, curve, if it's just a straight line, that usually means that you're not adjusting your scheduling properly to the environmental changes. So we want to see that nice bell curve. And from a system maintenance perspective, you want to make sure that you audit your irrigation system periodically. Approximately every 3 to 4 years, you should have a pretty formal audit of your irrigation system to identify deficiencies. I would say seasonally, you should also take that look around the landscape, see if there are any depressions, if you see guzzlers, that should be done seasonally, but an actual proper audit every 3 years. There are more than, this number's wrong. I didn't update this. I believe there's more than 3,000 irrigation professionals who have been, I think it's more than that, but we'll go conservative. Irrigation professionals who have been certified by one or more WaterSense labeled program. They are listed in the WaterSense directory of certified professionals. So if you do not already have a professional that performs an audit for you, you can find professionals there that are trained on water efficiency practices. They can also help you with your scheduling if that's something you didn't want to tackle on your own. I understand. All right, so tracking water use can be a great way to determine if there are spikes in water use that would indicate a problem. So for those working with Energy Star already, tracking use is one of the features included in the Portfolio Manager, Energy Star's utility tracking portal. Portfolio Manager is free to use, so anyone can start tracking building water use. Water meter information can be entered on the water tab next to the energy tab. By tracking water use, you can identify where you might be losing unnecessary water. You should keep track of your outdoor water use just like you do your indoor water use. If you only have 1 meter for the whole building or campus, you can add a sub-meter to the irrigation system and track it separately. Again, I think that's really helpful for scheduling and to find leaks, because you can see that nice bell curve. And then again, note that sub-meters do not need separate utility accounts. So that's something that you can track on your own. The water use outdoors can come from several sources. Municipality supplied portal water is water that is safe for human consumption and is obtained from the public water systems that are classified and permitted. Municipally supported reclaimed water is wastewater from a public system, which has been diverted for beneficial uses like irrigation. Alternative water generated on site can include rainwater or stormwater harvested on site and can be reused as irrigation water. And then there are, of course, other water sources still, and those are obtained from natural freshwater sources that are not municipally supplied, including surface and groundwater systems like on-site wells, lakes, or streams. And these sources can be used as inputs for Portfolio Manager as a way to track your water use and your water intake. All right, I'm almost done. Thanks for hanging with me. We have plenty of resources on the WaterSense website with tips for residential and commercial landscapes. The Water Smart Landscapes Guides covers many of the tips that we talked about today, such as planning ahead, using native plants, plant based on site conditions, how to group plants, zone your plants, and minimize turf grass and steep slopes in your landscapes. We also have 2 guides for micro irrigation, one for irrigation professionals and one for homeowners. You can take a peek at both of them. Micro irrigation is beneficial because it provides a very low flow rate of irrigation directly to the root zone of plants. The application of water will depend on the plant needs. Micro irrigation also is commonly referred to drip lines, or as drip lines, and drip line emitters work well for trees. They can be shaped to fit the landscape. They're like those long lines that you might see in some commercial landscapes. Those are what we refer to as micro irrigation or drip lines. So micro sprays are also a type of micro irrigation. They are a point source emitters that work well for shrubs. They work well for shrubs that may not be on a direct line of irrigation. And although development with residential landscapes in mind, the micro irrigation guides, can be useful for commercial landscapes. So they are geared towards residential landscapes, but all the facts applied. And for each of the labeled products that I talked about, we also have mini reports that provide information on the installation and maintenance for both professional and casual audiences. All right, we also have more resources. We have plant lists on our See What to Plant website. You can see that link there. This is a list of plants that are either native or drought tolerant all across the United States. There are national resources. There are state resources. It's not an all-encompassing list, but I think it's a really great place to start. There's also like regional plant lists, so maybe like the Midwest or the Northeast. So check that out. We also have a brochure called, which I mentioned, Is Your Watering Under Control? This is a great one for scheduling, has really anything you could ask about scheduling or irrigation controller settings. We also have another brochure called Cycle and Soak, and this goes over the cycle and soak irrigation practice, which is kind of exactly what it says. You cycle a quick, short cycle, you allow that water to soak into the ground, and then you cycle again. This is a great technique to use on really dense soils, so things that are really rich in clay, or slopes, that this helps prevent that runoff on the slopes. So if you just apply a little bit of irrigation at a time, let the water sit, soak in, it won't all run off at once. And then I think I have one more slide. Yes, so we also have WaterSense case studies. These are all focused on, or not all, but we have a few focused on outdoor water use, similar to the two appearing on your screen. You can read about these projects along with other case studies that we have highlighted around the country on the WaterSense case studies page on our website. Oh, and the study on the left actually utilized a grant from Northern Colorado Water Conservancy District. Not the same thing, but y'all are neighbors. But yeah, joining us today is Northern Water. Yeah, Frank Kinder. Maybe you are the same thing. Frank can clear that up. I'm actually about to pass it to him. All right, I will make Frank a presenter. Y'all are probably sick of me talking. All right, Frank, you should have control.
Perfect. Thanks a ton, Sarah. In fact, we are the same entity. One's kind of our brand name of Northern Water, and our formal name is the Northern Colorado Water Conservancy District. And indeed, this Harvest Gold project was also an HOA grant we did, where they did an irrigation upgrade and achieved a significant improvement and used all WaterSense components through that change for about a 25-year-old community, allowing them to keep the existing landscape that was working for them. So a really great example of how those components can improve efficiency and performance. So thanks a ton for sharing that information. We, in fact, do use all of the WaterSense components in all of our services in the range of education to grants and training. So a very useful program. We rely upon it for all of our investments and outreach. And so we very much appreciate what you offer to our entities. And I'm going to tell you a quick bit about who we are. So we're not a city, we're a raw water wholesaler, and there's entities like us across the West that were put together after the Great Dust Bowl and Depression to provide supplemental irrigation for regions that were growing and or had significant value. And so here we were a mining region, we had lots of irrigation for agriculture, and then the loss of that was such a threat that the country decided, in partnership with these communities, to co-fund the development of large projects with the Bureau of Reclamation. And so that we're a partner with them to provide operations for these services that not only provide water, but also recreation. So what I'm showing you here in these pictures is the invocation of our different service features. There's reservoirs on the eastern slope of Colorado, but the water originates up in the Rocky Mountains from the Colorado River. And that's part of the impetus for us to take this water very seriously and provide outreach and services to those end users like Harvest Gold and Fairway Ridge that Mike will describe here shortly. Importantly too, these projects create energy as you move the water over here through hydropower. So we maximize the sustainability of these systems, and we're working hard to ensure their sustainability in that delivery. All that to say, we also grow food over here, and we're growing cities, and we're working to stretch the water we have as much as we can to maintain the quality of life and viability of both. And so when you think about a conservancy district, we are not a finished water provider. We have no drinking water. And so this kind of gives you a quick overview of the collection of the water up in the mountains in Rocky Mountain National Park. It's shipped through a tunnel to the east, 13 miles long, and then has a variety of terminal storage reservoirs where it's used through multiple cities and then out eventually through the eastern plains over to the state line. And our format is similar to others in Arizona and California, where we are the first users of water, but other entities use it after us. And the water can be bought and sold on the market, and we move it around from the end users. And so we care deeply about the end use of that water to get the maximum benefit, especially considering existing drought, hence the services we offer. And a quick note is the services are designed to be regional in scope. Some cities have their own services and rebates, others have none. Our team exists to provide consistency across this 1.5 million acres that we serve. And we provide these resources to HOAs, schools, hotels, offices, commercial users, as well as residential, to help instill a new water ethos and then offer strategies for people to undertake wise water management. And we have some great success with that. I encourage you to take a look at our website when you have a moment. These are the tiles you'll find there. But our signature services are consultations, audits, and our grants. And so I'm going to turn it over here quickly to Mike to talk about his experience working with us on grants.
Thank you, Frank. And thank you again for allowing us to share the Fairway Ridge HOA's programs that have in our recent activities in order to attempt to impact our water usage. First, a little bit about us. So the next slide. We are a 75 townhome area, 29 buildings, excuse me. We were built in the late 1990s to early 2000s. And we have about 4 acres of grass and about another acre of landscape or drip zones. And we are adjacent to a public golf course, Mariana Butte, is in our backyard. So we have an appearance standard to a very green golf course. And they have virtually unlimited water. So in the next slide, you'll see a Google map of our site. The green or the first hole is above us to the north of us. We're the area just south to it. And we have significant southern exposure for our property, which does in the foothills of Colorado, where we only see maybe 14, 15 inches of water per year, can be a challenge to irrigate. By the way, the first hole is a par 5, 117-yard hole for those of interest. And the next slide, we'll talk about the 2 projects we're going to review. One of them is what was called at the time the WaterWise project, a turf to landscape conversion. And the second thing is what we learned by getting more involved in our irrigation system and actually developing a water budget. So we'll move from there. Next slide. In 2019, with support from Northern Water, we started a preliminary team in 2018, actually, to look at our water usage because we were watering sidewalks and streets and a lot of runoff. So we originally targeted, or we postulated targeting the easements because that seemed to be where the most waste was. But once we started working with Northern Water, we moved towards some challenged interior areas, and we decided to eventually convert 4 areas of around 5,600 square feet. Most of those areas were unusable, difficult to irrigate, sloped, all the things that you possibly can see on any site. We did do with 100% volunteer work with about 20% of our households participating, which included labor, tools, supplies, and also some refreshments at times. Planning took about 8 months from the initial applications to the first shovel. First shovel was in mid-June, after the day after a snowfall, actually. It took us about 8 weeks to finish the project. It wasn't full-time work, but it was how we could get crews available. The next slide will show you one of the sites that we have. It's known as the Storm Drain Park. So on that slide coming up, this is a site that is really sun-drenched, about 1,500 square feet of turf was converted here. It had irregular slopes and it had a storm drain on the back side. And so this was one of the areas, and this was a high view area from our main street, Rawson Drive. On the next slide will show East Island. It's surrounded by pavement or a court, about 1,000 square feet. And the third slide is the West Island, just on the other side. Again, surrounded by asphalt, about 1,000 square feet. Hit here, we generated a lot of excess sod during our stripping of the sod. And what do you do with it? Well, you could certainly spend to have it hauled off. We chose to make mounds with it, and you'll see that right in front of that white car there. We piled the sod up upside down, and multiple places built these mounds. And allowed us to consume the sod, but also help the appearance and the landscape look. We also did move some of the sod to a couple places on site. And last, we gave some away. Had someone actually come up, saved us well over $1,000 by doing things like that. The final picture, the next slide, will show West Rawson. It was approximately 2,000 square foot conversion. Multiple ugly utility boxes were in the center of a dried out turf area. This is our west entrance to our site, and so it helped improve the view there. And as you could possibly guess, it gets full mountain sunlight all the time. The next slide will detail a little bit about the conversion cost. And this is, we are entering now in year 5 from the conversion. We spent about $13,000 out of pocket. We received $9,500 approximately from Northern Water as financial support. So we netted out about $3,500 for the project cost. The raw conversion price was about $2.30 a square foot. Support was $1.70, so we netted a 63-cent per square foot cost. The payback was about 4 years on the initial cost. However, as you'll see, some additional expenses, primarily refreshing the mulch, has added to that. So break even is going to be a little longer to occur. Some conversion observations are on the next slide. Continue. About 80% from our community were positive. We did have a few questions like plant selection. Why wasn't it more colorful? But we leaned at more native-like plants or dry environment plants. Spacing was also a question early on. We knew the plants would get bigger, but people seemed to wonder why we had so much space. Of course, you had the elderly, some of the elderly wondering why even do this. And finally, just as a note, with the 600 volunteer hours, primarily a small group, a core group of a couple households and 4 people actually did the majority of the work. So you lose volunteers over time, and probably the more concentrated in the effort. If you can get these things done in a very shorter period of time, you're probably going to have more people who are willing to work with you. The next slide will show our one of our issues is our winter snowbirds. They arrive sometime around Thanksgiving, leave around Easter. These elk weigh anywhere from 800 to 1,200 pounds. We see over 200 of them for that period of time. Their hooves dig into our irrigation system. They pull up plants, and the males can really trash trees. So that's some of our landscaping issues, especially in the new area where the plants haven't settled all the way in. Okay, so let's switch gears and just talk about how we developed a water budget. So the next slide will show you basically our system was installed during the construction phase. We ended up with few surviving drawings. I strongly recommend that if you are in a new development, save every drawing you can, because it took us almost 6 months to figure out what valve went where, and of identifying and drawing maps and stuff. We do have issues, had issues and current issues with wiring, volume flow. We can deliver 100 gallons per minute, but actually at the heads we get reduced about 50 because of all the pressure drop. Now we're having a communication issue between the Rainbird that was installed in 2017 with 3G capability. Now 4G requires closer or stronger signals, and we've been struggling to get that. Anyone has a hint on that, I'd certainly appreciate some help there. We have around 200,000 square feet of grass, another 50,000 square feet of landscape, and we have a high clay soil, low organic mix, a great scrabble from the mountains, so we get very quick water runoff. The following slide, the reason why we started all this was we just were concerned about the excess water running off, especially focused on the easements initially. So the turf conversion ideas came up. Northern Water, we were introduced to, gave us a bunch of great ideas, connected us with the city of Loveland. We had our first audit with them. In 2019 through 2022, we actually took control of the system. We operated, a few mistakes, went dry one year, but found multiple leaks, changed heads, instituted cycle and soak. We handed off the system to a brand new company in 2022 and just said, have at her. They promised us that they understood water conservation, but it didn't go well. They reverted pretty much to all the old wasteful programs. This year we regained control, we reinstituted cycle and soak, and we're working with a company now that is highly motivated to learn what we're doing. So after a while, it took some time. The next slide will show you just some history of our water usage, and what you'll see here is on an annual basis, the millions of gallons in the blue columns that we have used. The red line you see is our calculation of what would be ideal based on Northern Colorado Water's site that's close to us. And we established an allowance of 30% over ideal. And you can see that very infrequently did our past landscape companies get close, maybe a couple of years. If you look at 2019, 2020, and 2021, when we were operated the system, we were pretty close within our margin of error of operating it efficiently. And of course, since we're paying the bills for the water, we were highly motivated to make that work. So the next slide will show us the how we developed the water budget itself. We determined the area of our turf and landscape using Google Maps and the area function in there. Net turf water demand comes from evapotranspiration data from Northern Colorado site NW102 and the precipitation from that site. So you subtract the two, you get net water demand. We had to guesstimate on the water demand for the landscape area. And so we decided to use a 50% of turf factor. I've seen anything from 20 to 80%, but we decided to use what Colorado Springs City's report has used in the past, and we felt that would work for us. We established an irrigation water unit. I thought at one time we could use information from the controllers, but it was we have enough nodes and some other issues in our site that we have just gone to an irrigation day of the way we figure out something. I'll show you in a second how that works. But and we also compare our efficiency to ideal. What would be the most efficient, no waste, perfect system? And then we allow allowance of 30% for startups, leaks, and overspray. Also did find this other guide that is possible for use for folks who don't have metered landscaping. The next slide will show our site. This is a 25-year history of 6,000 plus data points of evapotranspiration needs during our irrigation season, which starts in early April and late April, ends in early October, and versus how much water Mother Nature gives us. And the yellow bars you'll see there is how much water we have to supplement to the system. We do very well under 1 inch of water per week. Once we get over 1 inch, we can start having challenged surfaces, and that's caused us to do some adjustments, timings and things, but also an education process. So continuing on the next slide, on the water budget, and there's a report available. If anyone sends me their email, I will go ahead and forward you that report. But what we decided on was a 24-week season, irrigation season, never on Sunday because we mow on Monday and it reduces damage to the turf during the mowing. We slow things down in the shoulder seasons, and we go full bore 6 days a week. in high season. We've established 128 irrigation days over those 24 weeks using cyclone soak. We need a net water of 21 inches of water for the season, which equates to turf being about 2.6 million. Landscapes adds another 330,000 gallons. Our allowance is 880,000 gallons. So we've come to a number of, on a typical season, of 3.8 million gallons needed, or about 30,000 gallons per irrigation day. The next slide is another graph that's included in the report. But the reason why I wanted to show you this was you can see that sometimes we were using excess water even over the allowance of approaching 2 million gallons. And it was costing us money. In 2008, it only cost us $2 per thousand irrigation gallons. Now it's $6+ per thousand. And so any excess water use is really starting to cost us. If you look at the years 2019 through 2021, you'll see that we saved technically almost 2.2 million gallons during those 3 years while we operated the system, and we saved the HOA around $11,000. So it can be done by amateurs, so it's going to be, should be simpler to do by professional landscape companies. The next slide. Well, what do you do? How do you get there? Well, you got to work with your existing landscaper and partner. We don't hire a irrigation specialist just because to control the cost. You got to educate your members that during the hot summer, there's going to be some brown spots. Turf's not dying, it's just going dormant. But you do have to expect more from the landscaper, and just sometimes they'll tell you this and that, and sometimes you just have to say, okay, well, here's the way we want to do it. We haven't decided if we're going to, how we're going to approach this in the future. Do we use a carrot approach where if we use less water, we give a rebate to the landscaper, or if they overwatered, we ask for a refund? That's still kind of in the negotiation phase, and we may have to work with an attorney and folks on that. But you have to be willing to find a landscaper willing to work with us. How do you work with an older system? The next slide will kind of give you an idea of we have to plan for spending, both operating and or reserve funds. We know in the next decade, we'll have about in the ballpark of $200,000 of upgrading our maintaining and upgrading the irrigation system, and another operating cost of just normal wear and tear budgeted in our operating budget of almost $6,000. So it just has to be there because these old systems do start showing their age. So on the next slide, what could we do if we wanted to reduce water at our site? Well, we'll show here, if we did convert these easements we've been talking about, add more borders around our conifers, which just suck moisture, and almost no grass grows under them anyway, expand certain borders that look like they're challenged, and even reduce the size of our larger parks, we could save anywhere from $500,000 to probably 1.5 million more gallons of water if we really wanted to. The issue would be, of course, we'd probably expect more owner resistance. The conversion cost could be in that ballpark of $4 a square foot to over $10. And without significant financial support, we don't think we can convince our neighbors to do that just yet. We're of an older community, getting older, and fewer volunteers, so it looks like that would have to be hired out. So as we wrap up, conclusion from out here at a mile high, here's our thoughts, is that in the final slide, our 2019 WaterWise program, it really improved the appearance of our site. Again, we could not have done this without the financial support and encouragement of Northern Water. We eliminated some troubled spots. We are saving about 40,000 gallons of water a year. The cost savings, we have paid ourselves back, but also our maintenance costs are higher than the other areas, primarily due to the mulch refresh. We could save ourselves another, potentially, reduce the turf by another third and save 1.5 to over 1 million gallons. But I've already mentioned the issues possible with that. Our operating system, by just monitoring it, looks like we can consistently save about 500,000 gallons annually by staying with it. Partnering with some companies seem to have worked, but some other companies, landscape companies, just seem to resist these water conservation efforts. And there are multiple reasons that I'm probably not going to get into those weeds, but we're considering carrot and stick approach, and also to find if landscape companies could be certified. With our operating system, without Northern Colorado Waters or Northern Waters water data, we could not have done the in-depth study we have today. So again, thank you for your time and best of luck with your water projects.
All right, this is my turn. All right, my camera's on. We are definitely over time. Thank you to all of you who are sticking around. I mean, they can't hear me, but those who left completely understand. I'm gonna go super off script and rapid fire some info at you. I'm going to first send my email address in the chat. I'm gonna try and address some questions that I saw just really quick. Really great questions. If I don't get to your question, maybe because it's a little too specific, please feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to chat. Again, thank you, Mike, for sharing your experience. I think that was really helpful and informative. But first and foremost, some questions about WaterSense tools and brochures and just resources. WaterSense is a public program, meaning that all of our tools are free. So go to our website, check them out. There's tons of resources available to you. Please go take them. Please download them. Let's see. I do have control. Here are some specific resources that are really great for commercial buildings. Our best management practices. We have tons of, again, resources that kind of break down every sector that a commercial building might experience. So like there's one for outdoors use, there's one for pools, there's one for, I think, heating and cooling, all of that good stuff. Here's kind of a quick summary of things that you can do right now. This is really just going over what I covered in my slides. I'm going to skip through that because I know that we sent out our PowerPoints before. Please feel free to go back and look at those points. Again, this is a reoccurring oh my gosh, I can't talk when I'm trying to spitball. This is a reoccurring webinar series. These are our future events. Definitely look out for those. I did want to say there was a question about outdoor pools. We do also have a pool guideline. So there are water efficiency tips for outdoor pools. There was another question about athletic fields. Athletic fields you treat just like any other irrigated space. We certainly view athletic fields as spaces with purpose. So we promote the use and the care of athletic fields. But yeah, shading and wind blockers can be effective in reducing evaporation on both of those fronts. But you can apply a lot of the normal like irrigation kind of like tips to athletic fields as well. And again, we do have a guide specific to outdoor pools. Someone can interrupt if they saw another question. I think that covers the big ones. But before you go, I would like to launch a quick poll. Lost my little script for this slide. So we're essentially wondering if anyone has a case study to share like Mike's that they would love for us to highlight. The more stories we get out there, the more we can do for water savings. I think that poll has been launched. I'm seeing some answers come in. Again, I know we're well over time, so I don't want to keep you longer than necessary. Again, please reach out if you have any questions. Frank or Mike, I don't know if you have any closing remarks or comments you want to make. Apart from...
Sure, I'll offer a closing remark.
Yeah, thanks, Frank.
There's a lot of opportunity here. It's not always easy. As Mike indicated, some entities are still learning and might be resistant, but you can really find some fascinating improvements, and the components do work really well. And we find that many of our grant participants are pretty inspired afterwards, and they like to see the changes over time. And I think that there's a lot more opportunity going forward. The plants are getting better, even the new turf varieties. So I'd say motivating your user base is part of the challenge, but you can also have excellent metrics like Mike showed today. So thank you, Mike and EPA, for partnering with us on this effort.
Yeah, I would like to just echo what Frank said. Also, I'm seeing some questions about ET data on top of maybe drought data. All of that can be found usually through other government agencies like NOAA or perhaps the U.S. Geological Survey. So check out their sites as well. They have a lot of really useful information on climate with regards to maybe how much you want to water. And yeah, without further ado, thanks for joining us.